Welcome to the Bulldog State of Mind podcast, brought to you by the Fresno State Staff Assembly Executive Committee. Here are your hosts, Belinda Munoz and Melissa Norris.
Welcome back to A Bulldog State of Mind. In honor of May being Mental Health and Wellness Awareness Month, today's episode is all about mental health and wellness. And specifically, we're going to take a look at how we approach mental health for the men in our lives.
And to do that, we have our very own Zafar Sumler, who's here with us today. Zafar, you've been a part of this community at Fresno State since 1998. Have spent the last, 7 years at the Student Health and Counseling Center as a licensed marriage and family therapist. And you've done so much, I think, in your work to empower students to take charge of their mental health. So we're very excited to be here with you today.
Well, thank you guys for allowing me to be here and putting the spotlight on men's mental health.
Well, with this, we've I think over the last 2 years, mental health and wellness has been a little bit more in the forefront than it has in the past. But one of the things that hasn't really hasn't really surfaced or we haven't really taken full advantage of is our mental health and wellness for the men in our lives. And, specifically I can say I'm the youngest of 6 and, there's 5 girls and 1 boy. My brother was very much in touch with his emotions and stuff. You kind of have to be in that household. But my husband, who was raised with just brothers, it was a very different dynamic, and it was very different when we got married, and the whole mental health and wellness aspect of that. So I know for your background, you kind of have a little bit similar background to myself. You were raised with sisters, right?
Yes. Yeah, I was raised with all ladies in the house. So we did a lot more sharing, or should I say they did a lot more sharing. However, it just opened up the door for me to, know that it was okay to kind of share your emotions. Whether or not I did that, that's two different stories. There are a lot of different things going on there. However, definitely growing up in my household, we were allowed to kind of share emotions. So I'm very grateful that I got that experience.
Well, and I think a lot of what we learn about mental health, we learn from those early years in our upbringing and our households and how it's modeled for us or how it's not. So as you kind of think a little bit about that with your upbringing, what were some of the things that you kind of learned younger growing up about mental health and what it looked like for men?
Well, if I'm looking at it from more of an indirect way, as far as the community and maybe culturally speaking, definitely was something that was not talked about as far as men receiving mental health services. And remember, we're talking about, the 80s. So just mental health services, period, was a lot more stigmatized. And so for me as a male, in my community, I grew up in Richmond, California. It was definitely one of those things we didn't talk about much. You literally, in a sense, had to be quote unquote crazy, to receive those services. So like I said, I was very fortunate for myself to grow up in a household where those emotions were okay. However, it was still affected, by the outside community because of that. And me being a male, even in the household, I was maybe more unwilling to share those things just because I was getting those other messages from outside of the house, and that is not okay in the sense to share those types of emotions without feeling like you were, all kind of names in the book, but at the end of the day, to be weak.
But I think you talked about you have to be, back in the day, it was about you having to be crazy to take services. But the reality is that it doesn't even have to be that there's something major going on in your life to need to be able to talk through some things. Sometimes it's just we're human and we have emotions and things happen around us and we watch something on TV. We see someone else being affected by something that affects us. There's so many different reasons why it is okay to talk about your feelings and talk about what's going on in your life. And I almost feel it, and help me with this part of it, but I have a grandson. I have grandsons, and I know that my my daughter will sometimes be like, when he's crying about something, she's wanting him to be a little tougher. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, let him cry, and so we kind of go a little bit back and forth on that. And I get her aspect on that, yet I'm about feeling your emotions. So what is your take on that piece? Like, on both of those, one being young and having to go through trying to navigate what that looks like, and then also the different reasons why men would seek some type of counseling.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, being young and just trying to navigate those places. If I could just remember me being a youngster, like I said, it was a little difficult because you didn't know what to share and what not to share. Would you get in trouble for this, or would you not get in trouble for that? So when you kind of given the example of, with your grandson, I would encourage, parents to absolutely be open to allowing, your kids to express themselves, and then having whatever conversations you might need to have with them. And I mean, in all honesty, I have 7 grandchildren. And so, even talking to the younger one that's 4 and 5, even talking with them, it's about like kind of having open communication. Parenting, of course, didn't come with a handbook, so people do their best with that. So I would never try to step on somebody's parenting skills. But I do think from the work that I've done, and even working with children in the mental health field, the more open they are to experiencing the full wide range of their emotions, the more in touch, in the sense that they just are with themselves, and then they learn how to express that in a more healthier way.
Well, I think how we respond to them in those moments says so much more than what we say. It's the reaction, that instinct, and like, oh God, don't do that, or I'm put off by that, or I'm afraid of what's going on. They're picking up on so many things at a young age. And I think with so many of our employees being parents, grandparents, aunties, uncles, whatever it might be, we have such an influence on our younger generations to model for them what this can look like in a healthy way. So I think there's a lot of power in that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Belinda, what was the second question again? Sorry.
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I think that the thing is, one about my grandson being young and how to navigate that as they grow older. But I also was wondering about what would you say are reasons why a male would go and seek counseling? What's okay? And is there an okay and not an, it doesn't have to be a tragedy happen, right? And I think that's what I'm getting at is I don't think that something major has to happen in someone's life for them to be speaking to someone.
I agree 100,000%. This what we experience is through our lens, through our perspective. And I think you want people to be empowered to make meaning of like what that is for them. And when someone is distressed, in a sense, it doesn't matter what for. It doesn't have to be some traumatic event for everyone else for it to be something that really sticks with you. And anything that threatens your peace, your sanity, your ability to see yourself a certain way in a healthy way is more than reputable to bring in to talk about, to explore, to try to figure out how you navigate, how you navigate that situation. Yeah.
What is your approach when you get whether it's a student or, a male figure that comes seeking help? What is your approach with that? How do you get them to feel comfortable in that space?
Well, you know what? I support them. I simply support them. They always say meet someone where they are. That's what I do. You build a therapeutic relationship. You're making a bridge for someone to have a bridge to themselves. So for me, it's really just coming in, listening, supporting, no judgments. I think that's one of the big things for me is like, I tell people from the beginning, I'm a co-pilot. You're the pilot. I am just here to kind of help, connect some dots or turn the puzzle pieces over and help you figure out what the puzzle is supposed to look like for you. So I do think like part of this is empowering them through just sitting back and allowing them, in a sense, to have the space.
And I think so often there's that misconception that if I'm going into therapy, that I'm going to lose that control, or I'm going to have to share every last little thing, or there's just so many, I think, fears, but there's also a lot of misconceptions, I think, about what therapy looks like, that for me is something that I see stops people from even taking that first step, because they're imagining what they see on maybe a movie is, they have to lay on the couch and lay back and tell you about, how my relationship with my mom or my dad affected me. And I think sometimes even that like cinematic perspective of what therapy looks like puts that wall up immediately.
I agree. I mean, even when I see those things on TV myself, I'm like, that's not what we do. I would have never asked that question. They all in these people's business. Like, hold on, get to know somebody first. But yeah, those things definitely affect, people's desire to come in, or willingness, to come in. So I would just say, for people that ask questions, don't rely, in a sense, on TV or maybe some of the misconceptions. Look around, ask questions. Like I say, people go to therapy for so many different reasons, from, something that can be very debilitating to some things that are just very light. You're adjusting to coming to college for the first time. You're leaving your house, you're coming from, this city to maybe a bigger city or to a smaller city. And those are some adjustments. So I definitely think it's just about like someone's, just perception of where they are, and just getting help for what they need.
There's almost that process you have to do to reframe it before they even get to therapy, right? I look at that as like things that we can all impact, is how do we reframe what it looks like, and again, model that outwardly as we're talking about mental health or talking about therapy, to demystify some of those things.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I definitely try to do. It is in all honesty, one of the reasons why I'm in this field was part of just kind of making it easier for people to kind of take in. And then what I absolutely try to do is like say, kind of reframe like what the process is gonna look like. It's something that's not, you don't have to fear. I'm not here to, like I say, to dress you down or to like be nosy and just find out, all your business. I want to allow people to be expressive of what's going on with themselves, so that they can learn how to, make decisions that leads them in the directions that they want to be led in, and it's up to them, to make those decisions.
And it's private. No one needs to know if they go or they don't go.
I mean,
not that it's bad to speak on it, right? Or to share what you're learning about yourself with others, empowering other men around you. I'd hope that whatever they get from any of your sessions, that's what they're going out in the world and doing, is empowering others, or their, future children, or just, and anyway, anything that they do. I mean, having conversations and learning a little bit about yourselves. It's like we tell our students now, everything that you learn here on campus is not just about what you're learning in the classroom. It's about what you're learning all across in your job, in your group sessions and everything. You're taking that into the world. It's that same concept. What you're learning in your sessions, it's not just about for themselves, because they're learning how to be better in public and relationships and, all of these things, and at work, how to handle these type of things. And I guess that would lead me to my next question. For myself, someone like myself who is married, and, I have children, and I'm surrounded by male students in my office and whatnot, what would you say to me that I can share, or how I can encourage those around me to come and seek some services from you?
In general, if we're just talking to just a larger just population of everyone, it's really, to maybe get a transformative experience that just allows you to be in a better place with yourself, allow you to navigate the world just in a much more comfortable and confident, place, no matter what's going on. Just from my experience, a lot of the issues that people come in with, whether or not it's the way they see themselves or the way they interact with others, a lot of those things are events they've been through and experiences. Those are the things that usually lead to like the angst, the loneliness and the depression and the anxiety. It's not like you just, it's just something that is like, you have a heart condition and you just have that thing. It just like, it shows up. A lot of these things are based off of the experiences. So I would just have anyone come in sooner than later whenever they're feeling like, hold on, I'm not aligned with myself. Like the environment is not aligned with me. Those are things that you want to come in and, and talk about. Men, I think one of the things you really want to do with them is, I think at the same time, is really, really is about the transformative piece. Men like to be empowered. They like to feel like they have purpose, and that's some of the societal stuff too. And I mean, we all do, just as human beings. But I do think it's a really big deal for men to feel purposeful. Us, in a sense, one of those stereotypes as providers. Those things are those things that plays in the back of our, in the back of our mind. So anything that can threaten that identity, our ability to do those things, I think those are things that, as well as, men can come in and talk about, like how those things type impact them. If you want to kind of have a man say, oh, well, I'm struggling to be that provider, in the sense that if somebody can help me with that, then yeah, I'm maybe willing to go, talk about that.
I think there's a lot of power in that, and I know you get an opportunity to work with our men's group here on campus. And again, creating that space where men can talk to men about their mental health and acknowledge some of those things that are going on. Because I don't necessarily know that it's that you're having conversations that are any different than any other person, right? Like you're still, I imagine, again, I'm not in those spaces, so please correct me if I'm wrong. I imagine a lot of the conversations are the same that you're having with any other student. But it's the power of being across the room from another man, getting to have that man-to-man conversation about something. And I'd imagine there's a lot of power in that.
Absolutely. So me and my trusty colleague, Steve Sanchez, yes, we do have our men's group on Thursdays in person at the Student Health and Counseling Center, just in case any students ever, would like to join. But it is very powerful to watch other students, other male students, or those who identify as male, kind of get a sense of belonging. It's they talk to one another, they're open to one another, and perhaps they wouldn't be as open in a different setting, just based off of whatever their experiences, might be. So it's a very powerful thing when you see, these group of people connect with one another, and perhaps they wouldn't have otherwise, or maybe they are on this campus walking alone, and just doing whatever they got going on, but yet now they found a sense of community, a sense of belonging in that group. Yeah, it's pretty powerful.
Well, the alternative to not speaking on the things that are bothering them, it becomes, this domino effect, right? We just keep stacking things on, and at some point, there's going to be relationships, and you're going to have to relate to another person, and it could be, it took my husband and I, a little while to get used to being in the same house all the time, all day, every day. And, having to figure out when I was having a moment or when he was having a moment. And so it's so important to be able to see that and understand that about yourself, so that what you're going through, and then you can say, right now, I just need a minute. It's not about you. I just need to, whatever it is, walk away, whatever.
Absolutely, Belinda. So one of the unfortunate consequences of like not speaking when you are younger because you are male or whatever the case, maybe is because then we don't express, ourselves, and it makes it really hard to express ourselves. So then we do show up, in other relationships and are unable to do that more than likely because we have not had the healthy relationship, like you say, with ourselves. So, it's really hard to have a healthy relationship with others when you are maybe not even quite aware of like how you even experiencing the world, or experiencing yourself. So how can you communicate that? How can you even, in all honesty, even put your shoes in, put yourself in someone else's shoes when you like haven't even been in your own shoes, or you're uncomfortable, in your own shoes. So it's super important that we build that relationship with ourselves. That's just my main thing, is like really allowing people, and this is everybody who comes in a room with me, is like really learning who you are, and that's not for me to say that. That is absolutely for you to build your concept of yourself.
Well, it's an investment in yourself. If you look at it that way, I'm choosing to spend the time, the energy, the effort to make me a better me for myself, but also for the people around me, for my kids, for the people that love me. If we don't take that time, we're not helping ourselves, we're not helping anybody else around us either.
No. And a lot of times what ends up happening with those is we just end up coping in an unhealthy way. We don't know ourselves and we're struggling with things, and we don't have the introspection to really like talk ourselves through things. We are going to try to comfort ourselves in whatever ways that we can. And unfortunately, a lot of times that's more in unhealthy ways, substance abuse, letting out our emotions more in maybe a more aggressive way, especially when we're talking about, males. Males are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than women. And I think it's all a part of this, not allowing yourself to be vulnerable with yourself. So we made this vulnerability like this weakness, when at the end of the day, it is a strength. You can be vulnerable with yourself and learn who you are. There's almost nothing more powerful than that.
I agree. Thank you. I love this topic. My husband, I've shared a little bit about my husband and his background, and having had 3 daughters after being raised in a household with just men, and of course his mom, but, with just brothers, and his dad, who was, I guess, quote unquote, like that very macho man, right? It took years, and I'm talking years, for my husband would always go up to my father-in-law and say, "I love you, Dad. I love you, Dad." And he'd be like, yeah. He would not say it back. "I love you, Dad." And he's like, yeah. Leave me alone, and he would have a smile on his face. So my husband knew that he loved him, right? But it took years before my father-in-law actually said, "I love you" back. And when he did, my husband nearly fell out of his shoes. We all kind of looked like, okay, act normal. But, but it was such a moving moment. But he, it meant the world to him at that time. Just such a small little thing that, I sometimes take for granted, because I'd say I love you to everyone, and I get it back in return. And for that moment to happen, I was so proud of my husband for doing that and not giving up and continuing to say it. But it was such a moving moment for him to get that back from his dad, who had this macho, you don't show your, expressions, you don't show your feelings to people, and to be able to show his feelings. So what would you say to our listeners out there, students or faculty or staff, both men and women who are listening today, and whether it's someone that they're wanting to encourage to go seek someone, to go seek speaking to someone, or for our male listeners who are interested, just don't know where to start, don't know where to go?
I think it goes back into what Melissa was saying, especially for males, we like words like investment, so definitely looking at it, as an investment. I definitely think if you're trying to encourage someone, you have to meet them where they are. You just have to support them, continually asking them and keeping the door open for you can share what is going on with you, with me. And, hopefully that dialogue in a sense can lead to a deeper conversation about perhaps some professional help could be helpful, as well. But I do think it's all about like listening. You want to validate, the feelings, males, we want validation, as well. So definitely validating, those feelings and like you say, just kind of meeting them, where they are. It's a difficult thing because of all of the stigmatization. It's a hard thing. And like I say, there's all these other identities that, males kind of have placed on them as providers and things like that. They don't have time to, we just need to bring home the bacon, and this and that. We don't have time to check in with our mental health. We need to protect, and those things. So we just have to have larger conversations about those types of, identifiers for males and how we can work around those to break those down just a little bit, or reframe those so that people are more likely to say, okay, well, if I want to be the best provider, if I want to be the best protector, maybe I need to know a little bit more about myself. If I want to protect this, I'm going to protect my village, then at the end of the day, I have to learn how to prioritize myself in that.
Well, and I like that you talked about keeping the door open, because the reality is, I think, especially I'll speak for myself when I'm concerned, let's say, about another male, and I want them to seek help. It ultimately, it doesn't work because I want it to work. It's not, even if they take that step, even if they go into therapy, it's not going to work unless they genuinely are wanting to be there. And so I think that concept of keeping the door open and constantly opening that space and that conversation is so valuable. Because whether they're ready to seek that help or not, at least knowing that you're a safe person, that, hey, when you're ready, if you want to talk about it, here's how I handle things, brainstorming together how to support one another. I mean, I think there's so much we can do even when there's resistance to seeking that help too.
I agree. Yeah. It's all about the support. It really is. It's all about the open dialogue, leaving things open. People like flexibility. People want to have a choice. So I do think like that's one thing, is just giving them the ability to be open and to make a choice when they want, to make a choice. It's super, super important. So many people say, I see them and they say, well, you know what, I was going to go 5 years ago, and, I can see them kind of beating up on themselves. And the first thing I say is, well, I'm just happy that you're here right now. Let's just honor that person from 5 years ago, and, and they've gotten you here. So let's do what it do, like right now. So I mean, sometimes that's just part of you talk about the process. That's part of the process, is the resistance.
Well, you have shared so much with us today, and I really appreciate all of your expertise in this area, and it's such an important topic. Is there anything else that you have not already shared that you would love to share with our listeners? Again, anything that what they can do if they've been thinking about it or know someone?
I mean, like I said, definitely want students and everybody is just to encourage each other, to get the help that they need, and allow that to be, in a sense, like I say, on their time. Now, if you see someone who is truly struggling and you have to kind of make that call, definitely would say, for those who may feel like they are overstepping, a boundary or something like that. I think you want to make sure that the people around you that are taken care of. So I definitely would encourage anybody who knows that there's an issue, you might want to, push on that a little bit, more. However, I would just say being supportive. We talked about the men's group, and I just think we're seeing the group that we, in a sense, have now, and it's open group, so more people are more than welcome, to come. But we can see how they kind of are gelling together, and perhaps they didn't have that before. And it's just about getting in these spaces, having these experiences, and allowing those things to reinforce themselves. So.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you. I always appreciate the opportunity to hear from you. I think you have so much expertise, and I love your outlook about empowerment when it comes to mental health, because I think that's something that is just so critical in the conversation. So thank you so much for being a part of this today.
Well, thank you guys for allowing me to be here. I truly, truly appreciate it.
Well, for those of you who are faculty or staff members, keep in mind we do have Empathia. We do have our insurance, obviously, does also support that. But if you're looking for something on campus, it's free. You get so many sessions a month, or not, so many sessions free. And I know we have one person on campus that does provide counseling, but if that person is unavailable, there's still other resources. We do have an online, we're so comfortable now with Zoom that if you're open to meeting that way, then there's definitely a lot more options out there of resources that you could use for campus. So feel free, go to the website, take a look at it, and make that call for yourself, not for anyone else, but for yourself. So thank you for being with us this month, and
we will have more updates coming soon about A Bulldog State of Mind, including some information about what you can expect coming into the fall semester. So stay tuned.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching the Bulldog State of Mind podcast. Join us for the next podcast in our series, released each month during our Red Friday celebration, and available through our Fresno State Staff Assembly Executive Committee YouTube channel.